So I'm pretty much wondering at this moment now um, about just different sort of similarities and parallels that Michael Haneke and Yorgos Lanthimos have. Because I've watched several of their films, both of their films, and they definitely do have a little bit of a seemingly similar approach. They both use a lot of formalities. They both use a lot of clinical filmmaking practices, and they both tend to both challenge and subvert the audience's inherent desire to be kind of entertained in an obvious way. They don't like to kind of entertain in obvious ways. So they like to be a little bit more thoughtful with their filmmaking practices. But as far as trying to kind of distill the differences, that is a little bit more complicated. And I'm kind of thinking through Michael Haneke's films right now. The Seventh Continent is a movie that I find really powerful. The imagery of the money being torn up and flushed, and the fish, and basically the entire like final half of the film, which I think most people who've heard of the film know how it ends, but because they probably are familiar with what the premise is, and the fact that it's kind of based on a real event. But I could say that there are things about that movie that remind me of some of the things that Yorgos Lanthimos does in both Dogtooth and The Killing of the Sacred Deer. I feel like I feel like the Seventh Continent, some of the DNA of the Seventh Continent made its way into those films. Let's see, Benny's Video is probably my favorite Haneke film. And it's one of my favorite movies ever. In fact, that film really, really blew me away when I was in high school, and I must have watched that movie at least like 3 or 4 times. I wrote about it, and I've explored it quite a bit, and I actually think it's a pretty provocative, pretty profound film, much stronger and much more thoughtful than really most of what anybody can come up with these days. I don't know. I can't decide whether that's my favorite Haneke film or if Cachet is my favorite, but I really love both of them. I think both of those are especially profound pictures in his filmography. Alternately, I think Funny Games is just stupid. I can't stand that movie. I can't even think of a single redeeming aspect to it. I mean, I guess that was Haneke's intention, to make it as off-putting as possible. So mission accomplished. But I personally think it's a pretty useless movie. I just, yeah. Either it works for you or it doesn't. It clearly didn't work for me. Didn't even bother to see the remake, even though I love Tim Roth. He's like my favorite actor. But I just can't do that one. Code Unknown I liked, and I actually would say that's probably one of the best films of his to start with. The was it 71 Fragments? I think that's what it's called. I like that one too. That one was pretty fascinating. The whole moment with the pickup sticks definitely stands out, and also just like the repetitive nature of that film and the kind of desensitizing aspects to it are fascinating. And actually there are some things about that kind of remind me a little bit of what Code Unknown was sort of aiming for. And I've heard that actually Happy End is quite a bit like Code Unknown, but I haven't actually seen that one yet. So then, as far as his other films go, I mean, Piano Teacher is absolute masterpiece. I think pretty much everybody can recognize the depraved genius of that picture. I actually really loved Time of the Wolf. I think that actually had a kind of a beautiful message, and in some ways, I think some elements of it could be kind of compared to The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And then Cachet, I think, is probably one of the great suspense films of all time. I think it's better than anything Hitchcock's made. Like, I just, that is a mesmerizing experience. And I kind of think it, I think that film sort of actually sort of succeeds in ways that most found footage films don't, despite it not being a found footage, quote unquote, film. But there are some found footage elements to it. But it's great, though. I mean, that talk about a profound, psychologically just scarring picture. I just love that one. I love that work. The White Ribbon is great, but not really something I'd recommend to most people. Only because it is very much a film that will make, I think, the average person suffer. It is a historical picture, but it's very confronting. And then Amour, again, very challenging, extremely emotional and painful. But I think the type of movie where the realism of it almost feels refreshing. So, but I look at all of these Michael Haneke pictures, and I guess I guess what Haneke's overall approach is kind of a perspective of condescension. As much as I love his films, I feel like he does tend to kind of go about his films and messages in a, this is something the audience needs to endure type of thing, like with that kind of attitude. And I it's obviously not going to be something that most people are in the mood for most of the time. It's not something I'm in the mood for most of the time. So I got to be really ready to watch a Michael Haneke movie when I sit down and watch one of his films. I haven't even watched any of his made-for-TV work yet. Like The Castle, I haven't watched. But I'd say if Michael Haneke represents the cinema of condescension, then I would say that Yorgos Lanthimos probably would have to represent, I don't know, the cinema of complicity, maybe. Like, so I don't like all of his movies. I wasn't crazy about The Lobster, I have to admit. I found that movie kind of mind-numbing and repetitive, mainly because of the music score, but also just the way it was structured felt a bit frigid, and that's kind of the way I feel about a lot of his other films too. Like, I feel like he kind of has a little bit of a more surgical feel to his films. And I look at a movie like The Favorite, which is about a real historical figure, and about how it's clearly a person who's unable to even like take care of, I mean, she's put in a powerful position, and she can't even handle the importance of the position, and she can't even take care of herself. She can't take care of her people. She can't take care of herself. And yet the way the film sort of frames everything is so, like I said, formal. It's clinical. This is orderly. This is function, mechanical. Like, his style is one of even placement, but it's almost like through his sort of intense structural approaches, he's inviting chaos. It's like his frigid, sort of obstructive, mannered quality invites chaos. And then I look at Poor Things, and even though I think I recognize that that's a movie that most people I know find utterly repugnant, and for some understandable reasons, I would say. What I like about that film was how it actually had a much more liberated quality than his other films. There was like a little bit more of a freewheeling, free-spiritedness that I felt kind of reflected the main character and her sort of journey, which the film is trying to really say something deep about kind of the differences between men and women. But what I really still appreciated about Poor Things inherently was how there was still a structure, and it was a frigid structure. There was still a sharp sense of control and confidence. And while I wouldn't say that Poor Things was as groundbreaking a film as Dogtooth, which I would say is kind of like the definitive Yorgos Lanthimos film, in the end, I think that he has a lot of things that he wants to say and a lot of things that he wants to communicate. And he has a little bit more of an anarchist kind of spirit to him than Haneke does. So I like both filmmakers a lot. I'd say Haneke has made more impressive pictures overall, but my interest is piqued about Begonia, because I've seen Save the Green Planet a lot. It's a movie I've loved for a long, long time. I've watched that movie a few times. I watched it, I think, back when it played on like the Sundance Channel at one point. And that film is a profoundly emotional experience for me. And so I'm very curious to see like what Lanthimos, like how he sort of adapts that material to his style. I don't really know what to expect there. Anyway, so yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about the two of them at the moment. Yeah, I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts about both of their works. I'd say out of all of Lanthimos's films, I'd say I don't know which one I like the most. I guess I'm leaning toward Dogtooth, but whatever. I definitely like I like Dogtooth, and I like Poor Things and The Favorite more than I like The Killing of the Sacred Deer and The Lobster and Alps. Like, to me, those felt too like genre specific. And whereas I guess to me The Favorite and Poor Things, those had kind of more historical approaches, but mixed with like science fiction and fantasy, but done in a way that felt not so much like forced. It felt more just kind of natural and part of the vibe and the world. Whereas The Lobster and The Killing of the Sacred Deer, I felt kind of obscured a lot of those elements in a way that was a bit harder to untangle for me. So yeah, I guess that's about all I would say about both of them. Great filmmakers, great movies, and that's pretty much all I have to say. All right, have a good night. Bye.